Hey folks, welcome to Textiles. All right, so we're going to start off slow, and I say we're going to start off slow because we're going to spend the next 2 weeks on this module. Okay, so the next 2 weeks we're just going to be talking about the groundwork of what we'll be talking about for the rest of this semester. So in order to talk about a fabric or a textile, we have to get down to its very smallest little parts. So we're going to start with talking about the raw material of fashion, which are fabrics, textiles, which the smaller component is fibers and yarn. So first, I want to make sure that you have what you need. Okay, so you should have this book, Fabric Fashion Complete Guide. This is the best, well priced, and well put together, visually appealing textiles book that I think that there is out there. It's a great price. And then you also, by the end of week two, I want you to have your fabric swatch book, right? So one of your assignments was to take a picture of you with your book. Take a picture of you with your book. I just want to know that you have it. And the reason why this book is so important, I'm going to cover my face for a second, is all of the swatches that are in the book, and we're going to be going through swatches. Look at that page doesn't have swatches on it. We'll be going through swatches every module as we're talking about things. So there may be times in the lecture where I'm like, go to page 11 and pull out a felting and touch it, right? This is, textiles is a very tactile, a touchy, it's a touchy-feely class. So oftentimes in the videos, I'm going to be talking about something and touching it as I'm talking about it, or I'll be doing a demonstration and I'll be pulling stuff out of the book. It's not always out of the book, but oftentimes I'll be pulling stuff out of the book. Sometimes, like, when we get to coloring, I'm going to be dying some stuff. So the book is really important, and this is a supplement because the textbook has one set of information, and the the swatch book has the concise version of the information. So it's really important that you have both of those handy as you are doing the lecture, and then especially when it's your textile evaluation activities and your project at the very end, you will need those as well. Also, on the exam, you I'll be pulling samples out of this watch book for the exams as well. Okay, all right. So what are we going to cover in this first 2 weeks? First, we're just going to talk about the importance of the textile industry and the importance of the textile industry, to the United States and our economy, but really to the world economy. We're going to talk about the importance of the textile history. We're also going to talk about the hazards of the textile industry. It's a major polluter as well, so we'll talk about that. I'm a historian by nature. I told you my first degree. I never made a video of history, but I kind of do when I talk about it. In this manner, we'll get a little bit of history on the mass production of of different textiles and the history. Like, what are the first things that we wore? What were the first textiles that were produced? We'll talk about that. This class, actually, textiles is it's a terminology heavy class. There's a lot of definitions that you just need to know. So we'll start off with a whole host of definitions that you definitely will need to know. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, and then the second part of this these 2 weeks of this module, not necessarily the second part, but in addition to those things I just talked about, I'm going to dive into the deepest, tiniest part of any textile. So we'll be talking about fibers. So as we get to each section of the book, we'll go deeper into animal or plant fibers versus man-made fibers. But we'll talk about get some basic definitions about fibers that then turn into yarns. We'll talk about the different types of yarns there are. We're going to talk a little bit about fabric construction. So we'll talk about different types of weaving and knitting because they're versions. There are different ways that garments are woven together, right? I'm using my fingers, so this way, different ways that they're woven together, and there's different ways that things are knitted together. And some of the things that you think are a weave are actually a knit, which is interesting. We'll talk about that. We also will talk about weights. So we'll talk about how fabrics are weighted, right? So we'll talk about the different measurements that they use for fabric. It's either yarn count. Most of us are familiar with the word thread count, usually in correlation with sheets. I hate to say it that way. That's how most people know what a thread count is, because a thread count of the sheet is what the bedding sheets are. So we'll talk about those yarn counts. So we'll get those different definitions in our lexicon. So we'll get those different definitions ingrained in us, so that when we get to each different type of fiber, different type of fabric, fabric, textile, that we'll have those definitions already on hand. And then one of the other things that we're going to refer to over and over and over throughout the semester with every different type of fabric we'll talk about characteristics. So we're going to talk about different characteristics of different fibers. So there's actually a document we use called the fiber properties chart that we'll go over, and you will use that every single semester. So it'll be downloadable in the module. Okay. All right. So this week, these next 2 weeks, what are we covering, right? So like I said, we're going to be talking about the history and importance of the fashion textile industry. We'll get a bunch of terminology. We'll talk about fiber characteristics. We'll talk about yarn. We'll briefly go over the difference between natural and man-made fibers, because we're going to dive deep into those every week. Okay, so what you need to do, down below this video, it tells you what chapters you need to read in the textbook, and also which chapters to review in your swatch kit. Really, sometimes I just pull it out and I just rub my hand over. I'm a tactile and touchy person, so we will have some fun with the swatch kit as well. So we're going to be covering, like I said, history, importance, fibers, yarns, weaves, a bunch of definitions you need to know, and characteristics. Okay, so this week, what do you need to do? Right? What do you need to do? You need to read the book. Read the book, and review the pages of the swatch book, right? Then review the lecture. It's created in bite-sized chunks. So even though we're covering this for 2 weeks, there's 2 different sections of the lecture. I just broke it up because I can only put so many tabs on a page before it becomes too much. So you will do review those 2 lectures, and then you're going to move on to your discussion board. This discussion board is going to be open for 2 weeks, so I gave you a little bit more time to get that done as well. Okay, so read, lecture, discussion board, and then when you get to the end, come back and look at the recap video. Okay, so that's what I have for you for this week, for the next 2 weeks. I'm really excited to have you in class. I'm looking forward to our discussion board conversations. They always are fun and oftentimes enlightening for me. So, and this video this week is a lot longer than normal. Normally it'll be about 2 minutes. This one is pushing it. It's longer than normal. Normally there'll be much briefer videos. Okay, so review what we're going to talk about this week. Do your reading. Move on to the lecture. All right, see ya.